Hi, Fossil Craze Paleontologist here, Dr. Brian Curtis.
And Jacob Jett.
And today we're here to talk about equipment. And it really all starts back in the lab, in the planning session. So first we have to figure out where are we going? And what are we going to look for? And sometimes we ask, what are we looking for first? Because when we're building another crate out, we're trying to find certain animals. This time around, we're looking for some late Cretaceous animals. So we knew Montana's got some great late Cretaceous rocks. Judith River Formation. So you look on a geology map, you find where you want to go. You make sure you get some GPS coordinates. Then you reach out to the various agencies and people that own the land. If it's a government agency, BLM, Forest Service, versus if it's private land. And today we're on a rancher's land. And it's very important that you get ranchers' written permission to access the lands. Just makes everything safer and easier. So once we've got all of our paperwork in order and our logistics, how are we getting there, who's driving, all this equipment, we now have to go find the fossils. So first involves the looking. And at that, there's a number of tools that we use to look for and initially flag and find fossils.
I start with making sure that I've got my personal gear ready to go, and that means glasses, sunglasses, and a wide-brimmed hat to protect me from the sun. I don't wear shorts. I wear long pants that are comfortable through the whole day because there's a lot of cactus, a lot of grass, a lot of ways to scrape your legs up. Sunscreen and bug spray is a big one. And then when I put my pack together, I make sure I carry plenty of water. I usually carry about a half gallon with me through however long I'm going to be out walking. Good walking shoes. In my pack, I carry a pocket knife for quick evaluation and digging. I carry a short shovel that I use mostly as a walking stick. I've got whisk broom, brushes, and some basic glue to stabilize any bones I come across, and some snacks. That's kind of an important one. And then I guess the big, really important things to keep in your bag are a notebook, a GPS, and a camera, so you can record and document whatever you come across as soon as you find it.
And for those of you who grew up with the ubiquity of GPS on your cell phone, that's not going to work out here. We haven't had cell phone signal for days. So we actually carry dedicated handheld GPS units that allow us to mark the exact GPS coordinates that we can get back to.
And in most states these days, you can actually get a special chip for your GPS that will show you land ownership boundaries on the map as you walk through it, so you always know you're on ground that you have permission for.
Once you find something, flag it, stabilize it, identify it. There's also tools we use to excavate a little around it to see what we have. So we'll use awls or chisels or ice picks.
I use a trowel out here quite a bit. A lot of times we're in a soft sandstone or really easy to work mudstone.
And sometimes you'll see a hammer, but these kind of rocks out here don't require it. But depending on the rock you're in, your actual bludgeoning instrument will vary. Anything from really hyperindurated sandstone, think of 200-year-old concrete. You might even use a single jack, a 2-pound or a 4-pound hammer. The really big, heavy stuff, once we go to excavate, we shift to, now we gotta get it out of the ground. So we look at it, we assess it, okay, we're gonna pull this out of the ground, this is the terrain around it, and then we bring in the big guns, the heavier equipment.
Yeah, I use jackhammers several times this summer. Every now and then I'll use a big piece of heavy equipment like a skid steer to remove a lot of the overburden. Once we get closer to the bone layer, we switch to smaller tools, but that's when we go to jackhammers, picks, and larger shovels, and we'll dig. The closer we get to the bone, the smaller and finer tools we'll use. Although we expose as little of the bone as possible while in the field, because that's a job better left for the lab, but we'll dig through and around the bone, and we'll go until we stop finding bones, and then we go a lot further to make sure that we haven't missed anything. And then we'll pedestal them and we'll do jacketing, which is its own special process to bring bones home safely.
And the jackets involve burlap. If you've ordered a fossil crate, you've seen our burlap, as well as wood shavings to keep it safe, because we're going to take the bone, the exposed bone, we're going to protect it with the burlap. We're going to mix up plaster. We're going old school. And you mix plaster in, you put water around it, you jacket the rock itself, and then you have to take the bottom of the pedestal out. So you use a big Johnson bar or some kind of big heavy pry bar to crack it off the bottom, roll it over, and then you jacket the backside to make sure the entire block is very secure, because these are never found on the side of a road. they're often under bumpy, treacherous terrain, so it's going to be thrown in the back of a truck if we're lucky, and it's going to bounce around. So you want to keep this thing as tight and secure as possible.
It's very similar to the process of when you break your arm and the doctor wraps it up to hold it steady and stable while it heals. Very similar concept.
Then you drive it home, or occasionally you helicopter it if you're lucky. Thinking at you, Allosaurus, Jim Matz, and I.
I've never used a helicopter. If anybody has a helicopter, call me.
Also, I was part of an excavation once where we had to use dynamite to blow the top of the hill up, because often they're on a hill and there's rocks up above. So you will have things tumble down, and that's not safe. So we had some large boulders that had to be removed.
I want to use dynamite.
The rest of the story, we were on a boat, so when we blew the rock, we used too much dynamite and it rained rocks down upon us, and we were all huddled over as it literally rained like Chicxulub hitting the earth and wiping out the dinosaurs. That was a very scary long 5 seconds. You saw it coming and then it hit us. It was terrible. But we get it back to the lab, and that's where the rest of the magic happens. I gotta open the jacket.
We start, I usually use a side cutting angle grinder.
Yeah.
Or sometimes just a powered, I'll use pneumatic grinders to peel the plaster and burlap off, and then we'll get into it. I usually start with a pneumatic air scribe, which is like a tiny little miniature jackhammer powered by an air compressor, and that'll chip little bits of the rock away. The closer to the bone I get, the more careful and detailed the work. I like to use microabrasion. I know a lot of folks don't, but I've got a small, it's functionally a small scale sandblaster, only we use really finely milled baking soda, and that'll clean the surface off of the bone. Hand tools, dental picks, X-Acto knives, that sort of thing.
Yeah, a lot of dental picks.
Magnification?
Yeah, on the smaller items. I like to dig up sauropods, so it's a 6 foot long limb bone. Sometimes I'm using a cold chisel and a hammer and chiseling away, because we're not really worried about the surface of the bone. It's not going to hurt it. And when it's 6 foot long and this big around, that's a lot of rock that has to come off of it. Conversely, when we're working with small items, small reptiles, small amphibians, fish, mammals, completely different set of the very tiny tools. Sometimes people will use a dental pick watching through a microscope as they pull off individual minerals from the bones. So there's a gamut of tools that's required, but you always want to use the right tool for the job. There's very few tools that you can use that are universally used on every fossil, simply because you need to make sure you keep that bone precious, because it's between 65 and for dinosaurs, 220 million years old. You want to make sure that you keep it safe, because it lasted this long. The last thing you want to be is the person that ruins it once it gets all the way back to the lab.